Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive. We're going to be looking at a topic that always seems to be in the news, especially with the upcoming Olympics. We're talking about the economics of the
Yeah,
games.
the Olympics.
I think everyone listening is at least a little bit curious about this.
Yeah, for sure. Of course, the Olympics are all about the amazing athletic achievements and, bringing the world together. But
Right.
there's this whole other side to the games that we don't always talk about, the money part,
Sure.
the economics of it all.
And that's exactly what we're going to be digging into today. To guide our deep dive, we're going to be looking at this 2024 working paper from the University of Oxford.
Oh, yeah, I've seen this.
It's called the Oxford Olympic Study 2024, Our Cost and Cost Overrun at the Games Coming Down.
Catchy title.
And this isn't just some, theoretical paper. They actually looked at the data from every single Olympics since 1960,
Wow.
going way back. And what they found about the trends in costs and overruns is
That's pretty amazing.
pretty shocking.
It really highlights how the cost of hosting the Olympics has been steadily increasing over time.
Mm.
And this upward trend, it's not just like a coincidence or anything. It's statistically significant, which means it's a real pattern. And
Statistically significant. Okay, now you're talking my language.
yeah,
So let's get into the numbers. What are we talking about here?
well, the last three Summer Olympics, Rio, Tokyo, and even the pandemic affected Tokyo Games, they cost a combined $51 billion.
51 billion.
$51 billion. And that's in 2022 dollars to adjust for inflation.
Wow. $51 billion. That's more than the GDP of a lot of countries.
I know it's hard to even imagine that much money.
It's difficult to really wrap your head around it.
And when you look at the numbers for individual games, it's even more incredible. The most expensive Summer Olympics to date was Rio in 2016, which cost a mind-blowing $23.6 billion.
And Sochi 2014, the Winter Olympics in Russia, was even more expensive, 28.9 billion.
Right. And the study actually includes this graph that shows this upward trend visually. It's pretty striking to see it laid out like that.
It sounds like, okay, so we've established that the Olympics are unbelievably expensive, but the real issue, the thing that everyone always talks about, is cost overruns.
Right, right.
The study even has a name for it. They call it the iron law of Olympic overruns because it happens every time. The average cost overrun for Summer Olympics is a whopping 195%.
Think about what that means. On average, these summer games end up costing almost 3 times more than the initial budget.
3 times.
Yikes.
And here's the most shocking part. Every single Olympic Games in history has gone over budget.
Every single one. Wow. So tell me about some of the most extreme examples. Like, what were some of the biggest budget blowouts in Olympic history?
Well, Montreal in 1976 is a classic example. They had a cost overrun of 720%.
720%. Were they building the stadium out of gold?
Haha.
Yeah.
No, but they did have a lot of challenges, like labor strikes and some really ambitious construction projects that ended up costing way more than they planned. And more recently, Rio 2016 had a cost overrun of 352%, which, really contributed to some of the financial problems that the city faced after the games. So this isn't just a problem from way back when.
Right.
It's still happening today. But why? Why are the Olympics so consistently going over budget? Is it just bad planning, or is there something else going on?
It's definitely more complicated than just bad planning.
Mm-hmm.
The study actually talks about several reasons for these cost overruns, and one that I found really interesting is what they call the blank check syndrome.
Blank check syndrome. Okay, I like where this is going. Tell me more.
Okay, so basically when cities bid to host the Olympics,
Mm-hmm.
they're agreeing to cover any and all cost overruns. It's like a non-negotiable part of the contract.
So they're basically signing a blank check without even knowing the final cost.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
And this combined with the fact that the games have a fixed deadline, you can't just postpone the opening ceremony,
Mm-hmm.
It creates this situation where overspending is almost inevitable. When problems come up, there's this huge pressure to find a solution no matter the cost because the show must go on.
It seems incredibly risky for cities to commit to something like that without knowing how much it'll actually cost in the end.
It is risky, but the IOC holds a lot of power in this process.
I see.
And cities are often so eager to win the bid that they're willing to accept those risks.
So it seems like the Olympics are in a category of their own when it comes to these cost overruns. But are they really that much worse than other big projects? I mean, we've all heard stories about construction projects going way over budget.
You're right. Big projects often do face cost overruns, but the Olympics are really something else, and the study actually has data to back this up. They compared the average cost overrun of the Olympics to other types of mega projects like nuclear power plants, huge IT projects, even stadiums.
Okay.
And guess what? The Olympics came in second place for the highest average cost overrun, a whopping 159%.
Second place. What beat the Olympics?
The only thing that had a higher average cost overrun was nuclear waste disposal projects.
Okay, I guess that makes sense. So even compared to some of the most notoriously difficult projects out there, the Olympics have a serious cost overrun problem. What is it about the Olympics that makes them so vulnerable to these budget blowouts?
Well, we already talked about the blank check syndrome and the pressure of those fixed deadlines. But there's another important factor, the scope of the games.
The scope.
Unlike other projects, the Olympics have this predetermined set of events and a specific number of athletes. You can't really adjust that. This lack of flexibility means that when unexpected costs come up, there's not much room to make changes and absorb those costs.
Right, it's like trying to fit an elephant into a shoebox.
Exactly. And on top of that, there's often this kind of power dynamic between the IOC and the host cities.
I see.
Cities are often so eager to please the IOC and secure the games that they end up making promises and proposing these ambitious plans that are really, really difficult to actually deliver on within a reasonable budget.
So it's this perfect storm of factors that kind of creates this environment where cost overruns are almost unavoidable. But surely there have been some attempts to reform the games and, try to address this. The IOC can't just be ignoring this problem, can they?
They are aware of the issue, and they have made some attempts to reform the bidding process and try to reduce costs. Their two big initiatives are called Agenda 2020 and Agenda 2020 plus 5.
Okay, so what were these agendas all about? What were they trying to do?
Well, the main goal was to encourage a more sustainable and fiscally responsible approach to hosting the games, moving away from that bigger is always better mindset. They wanted to promote things like reusing existing venues, streamlining events, and generally making the games less extravagant.
So did it work? Did these reforms actually make a difference?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, and to answer it, we have to look at the results.
Okay, let's do it.
Well, Paris 2024 was kind of seen as the first test for these reforms.
Paris, the city of lights. Did they manage to keep those costs under control?
Well, their estimated cost is lower than the last three summer games, Rio, Tokyo, and London, but still higher than some of the earlier games like Beijing in 2008 and Athens 2004.
So a step in the right direction, but maybe not a huge leap forward.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And even though their cost overrun is lower than some of the previous games, it's still pretty significant at 115%.
115%. Oof. So much for fiscal responsibility. It sounds like those Agenda 2020 reforms maybe didn't really work.
Well, it might be a little too early to tell for sure. Paris was just the first test case,
Yeah, that's fair.
We might need a few more games to really see if these reforms can truly tackle the Olympic cost problem.
Okay, so let's look ahead. What are the projections for the next few games?
The study looks at the estimated costs and potential overruns for Milano Cortina in 2026, Los Angeles in 2028, and Brisbane in 2032.
Okay, let's start with Milano Cortina 2026, the next Winter Games. What are we looking at there?
The latest estimates put them at $2.6 billion, which is actually higher than the historical average for Winter Games, but lower than some of those recent ones like Sochi.
Okay, so higher than average, but not totally breaking the bank yet. What about the cost overrun?
Well, that's where things get interesting. Milano Cortina is already sitting at a 78% overrun.
78%. They haven't even started yet, and they're already that far over budget. Are we looking at another Olympic budget disaster?
Well, it's definitely a possibility, but it's still early to say for sure. We have to keep in mind that these are just estimates, and the final cost of the Olympics can often be much higher than those initial projections.
Right, of course. So Milano Cortina might be another case of over budget and over budget again. What about Los Angeles in 2028? They've been talking about a more fiscally responsible approach, haven't they? Weren't they even saying they might be able to host the games without any public funding?
Yeah, Los Angeles is a really interesting case. Their initial budget was $5.3 billion, but that's since been increased to $6.8 billion.
Hold on, their budget has already gone up by over $1 billion.
Well, there's a nuance here.
Okay.
That later budget includes provisions for inflation, which the original one didn't.
Okay, so not an apples-to-apples comparison. So when we adjust for inflation and compare the numbers fairly, what do we see?
When we use the IMF and OECD's inflation projections to calculate the real cost overrun, something pretty remarkable happens. Los Angeles could actually be the first games ever to come in under budget.
Wait, are you serious? Under budget?
That's what the data suggests.
Wow, that would be incredible.
They're currently projected to be 5% under budget in real terms.
That would be a huge achievement. But you said could and potentially. What are the caveats? There have to be some, right?
Of course, there are always caveats.
Hmm.
Firstly, this all depends on their current budget estimates holding firm, which, knowing the Olympics, that's a big if. And secondly, those inflation projections are based on fairly optimistic forecasts. If inflation ends up being higher than predicted, it could easily wipe out those projected savings.
No glimmer of hope, but maybe don't get too excited just yet. Los Angeles 2028 is definitely one to watch, but I'm not holding my breath. Okay, let's talk about Brisbane 2032, the furthest out of these upcoming games. What's the outlook there?
Brisbane's situation is even more uncertain. Given the long time frame and the fact that they're still in the process of finalizing their venue plans and all that. Their estimated budget has already increased from 4.9 billion Australian dollars to 7.1 billion. And like with the later Los Angeles budget, that higher figure includes inflation.
Okay, so another budget increase. Are they projected to have a cost overrun too?
Even with the adjusted figures that include inflation, they're still projected to have a 2% overrun.
Okay.
It's not as dramatic as some of the past games, but it still suggests that they're not immune to this Olympic cost curse.
All right, so we've talked about these individual games, but the study also takes this broader view and looks at the overall trends in bid costs for the whole period from 1960 to 2032. What does that bigger picture tell us? Are we seeing any signs of improvement?
When we look at the estimated bid cost for all the games over that 70-year period, we actually see this interesting pattern. There's this clear increase in bid budgets up until around 2010, followed by a decrease.
A decrease. So are we finally seeing a downward trend in Olympic costs? Could those reforms be starting to have an effect?
Well, when we look a little closer at the data, it's a bit more complicated than that. While that decrease is statistically significant, there are some important factors to consider.
Okay, let's hear those caveats.
First, there's this possibility of, political bias influencing these numbers.
Mm.
The IOC, under pressure to make the games seem more affordable, might be encouraging host cities to present overly optimistic budgets.
So a bit of window dressing to make things look better than they really are.
It's possible,
Yeah.
and we have to remember that Agenda 2020, while it did focus on cost reduction, didn't really implement significant changes until Agenda 2020 plus 5. There's actually evidence, particularly from Tokyo 2020, that the IOC was pushing for these lower public budgets, even when expert forecasts were suggesting that higher costs were more realistic.
Interesting. It sounds like the IOC might be playing a bit of a PR game here.
Yeah, maybe. The second caveat is what we call optimism bias. Both Los Angeles and Brisbane's budgets rely on these assumptions of low future inflation and no further changes to their plans, which, given historical trends, are pretty optimistic assumptions.
So those seemingly lower bid costs might just be a mirage,
Right.
a product of wishful thinking rather
Yeah.
than a real change in how the Olympics are planned and carried out.
Exactly. If those optimistic assumptions don't hold up, we could easily see a return to that upward cost trend.
Okay, so it seems like there's this recurring theme here. The Olympics have this deep-rooted problem with costs and overruns, and it's not going away anytime soon. So is there any hope for change, or are we just doomed to repeat this cycle of budget blowouts and financial strain?
Well, the study doesn't end on a totally pessimistic note.
Okay,
It does offer some suggestions for how the IOC and host cities can try to break this historical pattern.
I'm all ears. What can be done to make the Olympics more financially responsible and sustainable?
One of the key things they talk about is better planning, and that starts with better data. Historically, there's been this lack of transparency, when it comes to Olympic costs. Host cities and the IOC, they haven't been great at sharing, complete and accurate cost information.
So they need to be more upfront about the real costs. No more hiding the numbers or sugarcoating things.
Yeah, exactly. And this honesty needs to go beyond just the official budgets,
Right.
It needs to include things like private contributions and any spending that happens outside of that official Olympic organizing committee. IOC really needs to take the lead here and create a more transparent system for tracking and reporting the full cost of the games.
Yeah, transparency is key. If you can't even see the full picture, how can you make good decisions?
Exactly.
But let's talk about the planning process itself.
Right.
Is there anything that can be done to make it more effective and, try to avoid those constant cost overruns?
Absolutely. The study actually talks about this new practice of non-committed dialogue in selecting host cities. This has actually extended the preparation time for the games to 12 years for cities like Los Angeles and Brisbane.
Wait, 12 years? You'd think that having more time to plan would actually make it easier to, stick to the budget and avoid those last-minute increases.
In theory, yes. But longer preparation time introduces this whole new challenge, inflation.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The longer the planning horizon, the more uncertainty there is about future costs. And unlike other large-scale projects, Olympic budgets don't usually account for inflation. This means those initial budgets can be way off, almost guaranteeing cost overruns down the line.
So those long lead times are kind of a double-edged sword.
Exactly. To make those budgets more realistic and avoid that sticker shock later on, inflation really needs to be considered from the very beginning. It's standard practice in other industries, so why not the Olympics?
Okay, so more transparency and factoring in inflation. Got it. Anything else?
The study also emphasizes the importance of being realistic about the uncertainties involved in a project this big and complex. Figure 10 in the study provides a really interesting tool for doing just that. It shows the cost overrun distributions for all the games from 1968 to 2024.
So it's like a historical record of Olympic overspending?
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay.
By looking at this again, historical data planners can actually determine how much contingency they need to build into their budgets, based on their risk tolerance. For example, if they want to be 90% certain that they won't go over budget, they can look at how much contingency was needed in the past to achieve that same level of certainty.
That's really smart. It's like saying, hey, we know things will probably go wrong, so let's be prepared for it, rather than just hoping for the best.
Exactly. It's about acknowledging the risks and being proactive rather than reactive.
Okay, I like it.
And speaking of being proactive, the study also talks about some pretty innovative ideas for how the structure of the games themselves could be changed to reduce costs and overruns.
Oh, okay. I'm always up for some innovative ideas. Tell me more.
Well, you know how Agenda 2020 plus 5 introduced that focus on individual events as the building blocks of the games? The study authors suggest taking this modularity even further and creating a system where events can be, replicated and reused across different games.
So instead of building brand new, expensive venues for every single sport, you would have these like standardized, adaptable facilities that can be used in different cities, kind of like Lego bricks for the Olympics.
Yeah, exactly. Imagine like a toolkit of flexible elements that can be assembled in different ways to fit the specific context of each host city. And the more you reuse and repeat these modules, the more efficient and cost-effective you become. You actually create these positive learning curves that drive down costs and reduce the likelihood of overruns.
Okay, I get it. It's about finding that balance between standardization and customization.
Right.
You can still have that unique and exciting Olympic experience without spending a fortune.
Exactly. It's about being smart, strategic, and forward-thinking. Ultimately, it's about ensuring the long-term sustainability of the Olympic movement. If the games become too expensive and too risky to host, they risk losing their appeal and relevance.
Makes sense. We don't want the Olympics to become this huge burden. It should
Oh.
be a celebration of sport and, international cooperation.
Exactly.
So it sounds like the Olympics definitely have a spending problem, but it's not an impossible problem to solve. With more transparency, smarter planning, and a willingness to, try new things, there's a real chance to make the games more financially responsible.
I think so too.
Yeah.
The future of the Olympics might depend on it.
Well, there you have it. Our deep dive into the world of Olympic finances. Hopefully this was informative and maybe even a little inspiring.
Yeah, for sure. And as always, we encourage everyone to keep learning, keep asking questions, and just keep exploring.
Exactly. And on that note, this deep dive comes to a close. Until next time, keep exploring, everyone.